This is the Fireside chat section of the event. We're joined by Chancellor Hagerott from the North Dakota University System and Monsignor Shea, who leads the University of Mary. And we're just going to have a conversation about what it means to be human in this time where AI is upon us. So please welcome our speakers and let's get going. Okay, let's check out everybody's microphones are working. Hello, Mark.
I grew up Lutheran, so Monsignor said this is about the Reformation. Is that right?
Something. I'm keeping the peace. 1633, south of Sweden. Monsignor, welcome.
Thank you, thanks. It's good to be here in this beautiful building. It's really beautiful. It's nice to have a legislature, I guess.
And the acoustics are absolutely amazing.
Yeah, they're wonderful. It's really impressive. And I feel so close to everybody here. I don't know if they're real or machines, but I feel close to them.
And, I don't think anybody's fake, but you haven't got deep fakes that you can touch yet. Okay, I'm going to start with a question for Chancellor Hagerott. You are a student of the history of technology. This is kind of an interesting moment that we're in. What is your perspective of what this moment is? And from a state and a regional perspective, how do we make the most of this moment?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, and thanks for being here. What a great turnout. I'm actually teaching a class in about 45 minutes, co-teaching at NDSU, and it's about artificial intelligence society, the history and philosophy of the machine. And I just use basically the structure of the syllabus to answer this first question. Some people are saying, like Elon Musk, that the emergence of AI is like summoning the deep, very dark, alarming language. But a guy named Jamie Dimon, who runs a major bank, was like almost reading the syllabus that Dennis and I worked out. He said, look at what's happening as the fourth general purpose technology. The other three was the invention of the steam engine and the gas diesel engine, which changed North Dakota. My great-grandfather broke the Hagerott farm near Crown Butte in Morton County with a 4-horse iron bottom plow. By the time he passed away, they were able to do the work with combines and tractors, and about 20 thresh and crew members working. The second event is electrification. My father was still alive, was born in a country house with kerosene lamps. And then the REA came and electrified North Dakota and shaped the world. The third one was something that I, old enough to remember, is the information communications technology general purpose, and that's computers, iPhones. Think of the magnitude of what those things did, and that's what AI will do. It's going to be that big. And so we are living at that time of navigating that, as you heard from the earlier speakers, the policy, law, the ethics, and I'm so glad Monsignor's here because there's things his institution can talk about that the public university really can't. At the deeper part of what does it mean to be human and have a soul, maybe in the age of AI. I'll leave the soul part to you, sir. But yeah, that's how I'd frame it starting up, and I can come back to maybe implications for the state later, depending on how much time.
Sure. And add a little on perspective what this moment is from a compute standpoint. If you go back to the first computers, and at least computers that used electrons, the ones and zeros were dials and switches, and then eventually made it to where you had punch cards, and eventually made it to where you had a screen, and then eventually made it to where you had graphics, and then eventually you could touch those graphics, and then it sort of learned to interact with you in a multi-touch, anticipatory way, and sort of slowly kind of learn your habits. That's the whole user data stuff. If you think about the ChatGPT moment and why it struck us so hard, even if people couldn't explain it, it's really the new interface. I mean, it's really if you look at the progression of what I just described, is the lowering of the friction, lowering of the sort of cognitive effort and domain knowledge that one needs in order to utilize computers. It's still, when you had to figure out your coding by literal ones and zeros, that was a tremendous amount of effort. And then when you got to punch cards, it was less. When you got to coding, it was less. When you got to graphic user interfaces, that's starting to get intuitive. Now it's a thing that you'll be able to talk to your computer. You'll be able to make the app you want by talking to it. You want a fitness app? You're going to be able to talk to your phone about what kind of fitness app you want, and then you'll be able to talk to it about how you like that better. So it's making computers do the work for people now at an individual basis, on a human-to-human typical interaction basis, which is just by talking. So the profound implications for that kind of a new interface, we just have no idea. Again, the apps haven't been developed yet. Anyway, I theoretically am just supposed to moderate, so. Monsignor, so we once believed that humans were unique in the ability to use logic, at least within the apostolic line. There's this long tradition of natural philosophy and reason and logic, and now we have these machines that seem to be emulating or maybe using logic and reasoning. What does it mean? What is it that makes humans special? And what does it mean if, for all practical purposes, at least our ability to discriminate between a human and a machine, if a machine can think?
Well, let me begin simply by saying how important this conversation is. It's great that the State University system, Valley City State University, the University of Mary, and other entities are able to come together to discuss these questions, which I think are really timely, as you said, Dr. Hagerott. If I could, Todd, let me get at that question by addressing just a little strand of something that Mark said a moment ago, the doom and gloom of people like Musk, or maybe Carl Sagan before he died was very concerned as well. He was saying that this portends the end of the human race. These kind of catastrophizing predictions have been made in the wake of just about every technology, because the question of the way that humanity interacts with technology is as old as the human race. And so there's a certain sense in which it's not an inapt analogy to compare AI with fire. Fire, of course, is something very useful that brings warmth, light, can even bring beauty, but it also can bring darkness and destruction if it's used in the wrong way. I've seen, if you pick up the newspaper, people are saying, what happens if AI gets into the hands of malevolent actors? What happens if it's used for evil purposes? That's totally inevitable. It's happened already. It's going to happen. You know what I mean? It is a question of how we think about this question. But the printing press and the steam engine and television and the internet itself, and then artificial intelligence. This is a perennial question. And so, how do human beings interact with technology, and what does that mean? Now, your question, Todd, is interesting in that I worry about it. I worry about the question. I've heard it before, and I think that in order for me to answer the question, I have to wrestle with it first, because I think it makes some assumptions about what human reasoning is, which, to my mind, are reductionist. Not simply in a setting of education that we would offer at the University of Mary, but in the setting of any education, including the education that's overseen by our state university system. Because, the term artificial intelligence, I'm told, was coined by John McCarthy at Dartmouth in 1956. I don't like intelligence as a word. Now, of course, it's caught on and there's no control over it, but intelligence is the highest human faculty in classical anthropology. So you have the intellect and the will, which are the higher faculties, that's what constitutes a person. Those are not just material, but spiritual realities. I talk about the soul. And then you have the lower faculties, which we share with the inanimate animals, emotion and sense. And human reasoning is a very complex, magnificent, deeply impressive, breathtaking, really, operation and interplay between these different faculties. Yes, the intellect itself is engaged, but it engages in ways that include the use of emotion and intuition and all of these different kinds of things. And so it is true that AI can mimic many aspects of human reasoning, but it mimics, to my mind, it mimics some of the lower level operations, the categorizing and sorting, and it does it in magnificently efficient ways, really impressive. But it can summarize, but not really synthesize in the full sense. It doesn't think. And the reason that I say that, and I know that probably there are people in here who disagree with what I'm saying, but to think you need a thinker. You need a self, something that is trying to approach a problem that's not simply a math problem or a material or practical problem, but a problem which pertains to questions of meaning as well. And I think that if we reduce our understanding, if we take the vast scope of what we mean by human reasoning and reduce it to what AI is able to do, no matter how impressive that is, in order to do that, we're accepting the premise that that's the highest and best we can do. But those are materialist presumptions, you know. They remind me, I'll say this last thing and then I'll stop. But when I was an undergraduate, I went to a small Presbyterian college, a half hour from here. And I was a young Catholic boy from a farm, and I was reading, I began to read really with great enthusiasm the novels of an atheist novelist from Indianapolis, Kurt Vonnegut. You remember that guy? Vonnegut, I think, died in 07, but in 59, so that was like 10 years before Slaughterhouse-Five, which was his big breakout novel, he wrote The Sirens of Titan. Titan is the largest of Saturn's moons. And he told the story of a machine alien who showed up on Titan, on the largest moon of Saturn, from a distant galaxy, from a planet called Tralfamador. And the Tralfamadorians originally were a very intelligent, sophisticated race of beings. And they couldn't solve this question of meaning. What did they mean? What did life mean? And so they invented machines to help them to discover what the meaning of life really is. So the machines got to work and came back with the conclusion that it meant nothing, that life actually didn't mean anything at all. And so then they said, well, we have to then eliminate ourselves. And so they began slaughtering each other, and they found out that they weren't even very good at that. So they gave the job to the machines, who then slaughtered everybody, and they took over the planet. Well, that's the kind of catastrophizing, that's the kind of reductionism, which, if we follow that bread trail, it removes the responsibility to say, what about the higher levels of reasoning, questions of human flourishing, ethics, those kinds of things. We can't rely on O's and ones. You know, there is an advancement here, but in the evolution that you gave of computing, we still are, at a basic level, dealing with ones and zeros. It's just a magnificent conglomeration of that. I don't know.
So, talking about reduction, in your, this wasn't set up at all, but in your swag bags is the Dakota Digital Review. There's an article in there about AI and the crisis of meaning. I wrote the article, so that's what it's supposed to be.
But he hasn't killed himself yet, so we know his answer.
But it is actually, to me, it's one of the bigger dangers. We talk about, you know, AI and its objective function turning us into paper clips or whatever. I mean, there's the real doom stuff, which I don't know, you know, how much time we should spend worrying about that. But the real obvious one is a continuation of what we've been doing from a reductionist standpoint. And you think about what we're training, at least these large language models on. We're training them on our corpus of textual information. We're training it on what's been written down. We're training it on things that we've made explicit, of something that we've reduced. And as a culture, the West has become very much oriented to, if we can explain it, we understand it. If we can't explain it, we don't understand it. And it's just a matter of time until we can explain it all. And AI has the potential to have an answer for us, to always have a sophisticated, reductive answer. I would argue that doesn't answer the question of human meaning. And I would argue, and that's a segue into my next question here, which is around mental health, which is in tech, and the use of tech, and both crisis of meaning and a crisis of mental health. I'm not really sure if we're going to be able to solve it, but if, in terms of on here, but I do want to, starting with the chancellor, and then anything you want to add, you know, where does AI potentially move us, for good or for ill, for where we've already gotten to, which is dopamine prisons, which is really short attention spans, which is, it used to be if you were a 14-year-old girl and, you know, you felt awkward, and you were trying to find your place, it was a small group of people in your community that were your sources of praise and judgment. Now we've scaled that to everybody on the internet, and so now people can tap into all sorts of judgment that isn't warranted, and now they're comparing themselves against people all over the internet, so that the things that is praiseworthy doesn't match. And so, just as an example, I mean, that's devastating to a developing teen trying to find their niche in society. Now AI comes along, and it's going to be monetized. Sam, every story you're ever in, you will never be the villain. Altman is now turning OpenAI officially for profit. It was the most ironic outcome, is the most likely. The thing that was created to be open source and not for profit is closed source and now going fully for profit. It will have to chase dollars, it will be monetized, it will go into applications, and it will be insanely good at captivating your attention to basically sell your eyeballs and sell your data. What do we do about it?
Well, I'm glad you got so many easy questions here. So
we'll give you 2 minutes, solve the mental health crisis in the meeting.
You know, I'm teaching these students, and we have great hope for the future. These are brilliant kids, by the way, and I call them kids. I wish I were their age, but they actually value Dr. Cooley and I because we have perspective and history, and so I would say that going back to the structure of these general purpose technologies that literally just shock the systems, right? And I want to thank you, Mary, and Carl Zovak. I have a TEDx talk you can look at 2016. Telling the story of machines coming to the Hagerott farm. You know, threshing crew with 24 men, the families feeding during the breaks, and then threshing machine, the horses, and then one generation later, my grandfather is running the Rumley Combine, Ford truck, and he's alone in the picture. Powerful statement that it went from a communitarian tribal, which humans are innately tribal, communitarian, right, to by himself. Well, the data now is out. Okay, this has been an open debate. My wife and I gave a talk at the Christian school where she was a teacher 11 years ago about the dangers of social media and computers and iPhones to children. And we had a lot of technologists in the DC area say, where's your data, where's your data? She's like, I'm in the classroom. And I was a professor, I'm in the classroom. Well now, Sherry Turkle, Alone Together, Jonathan Twenge, iGen, and now a book, Jonathan Haidt just came out, The Anxious Generation. Yeah. The data is in. Women's depression, body image was pretty steady for generations. 2012, addictions, it was correlation, causation, but it's so powerful, the data. When the iPhone hit critical mass, things changed. Because I tell you, my brother was a star athlete, homecoming king, I had acne, I was overweight, but I only have to look at myself when I go to the bathroom in the mirror. What if all day I'm seeing pictures of him and me and his girlfriend, me without a girlfriend, all day long, and reminded I'm falling short, right? And that's what these kids are seeing, these women. So what do we do about it? I'll just steal a little bit of this from my wife and from Jonathan Haidt. We have to rebuild community. We have to emphasize human connection, which I want to thank the organizers, Todd and Jerry, but this isn't being live streamed, just so you know. The people in the room are experiencing this together. Jonathan Haidt, interestingly, says if it's synchronous, even if it's on an iPhone, like doing FaceTime, I FaceTime with my grandchildren, I mean, that works, but it has to be real people, synchronous, whereas social media is full of bots and trolls and bullying. And some of the schools now, Virginia's leading the way, I can remember some other states, they are now having the students put their iPhones in a locker before they go to class. And already the data is showing people are interacting. I've said this to my kids earlier. Yesterday, the governor had a conference, and they get a speed thing. They said, what would be something you wished you would have done? He said, I wish I would have learned to play the piano. Okay. I'm old enough to remember that when there was an elderly lady, it was a neighbor lady, people would gather around, and my grandfather would play the mandolin, she'd play the piano. And there'd be tears in people's eyes. Nobody does that anymore, because guess what? There's always someone better on the iPhone, right? I mean, she wasn't the best piano player, and my grandfather wasn't the best mandolin player, but it was music, right? And so regaining those human skills, connections, I think that's where the educators come into that. And I know there's some questions about that, but I think we're really fighting for that human community. And as Todd said, it's otherwise being monetized in many ways. So I don't have a lot of answers, but I think we're beginning to find our way by having conferences like this.
Anything you want to add?
Mark, I think that people like Turkle and Haidt and Twangy, who was on our campus a couple of years ago, Jim came out, they've noted many very interesting things. And to your point, Todd, one of the things that they've noted is that the inventors of this technology don't let it anywhere near their children, their own children. And so I think that it's inevitable that we should see course correction around these questions. Of course, the victims of emerging technology always pay the price in the immediate aftermath of it rolling out. But humanity, as fallen as we might be, does band together to work for the common good in general. And so I think that, you talk about dopamine prisons and all of those things. Ideas have consequences. So if you go back even before the Industrial Revolution to the dawn of the Enlightenment, philosophers like Francis Bacon came up with sayings, knowledge is power. Now, of course, we splash that all around our elementary schools, but what he meant was something much more sinister than is usually understood. He meant knowledge is for power. It's not for the search for truth. It's not for enlightenment of mind and heart. It's not for the renewal of human life. Knowledge is all about power. And when it comes to that, and this is where technology has, it's a swords to plowshares kind of thing. When knowledge is conceived of in that way, and technology, which is the application of knowledge, is used in that way, then what it really is power of some people over other people. And that's where you get the nefarious uses of it. But I don't think we should resign ourselves to that. I don't think that those are the highest uses of these emerging technologies.
One other point, he's very good. He doesn't use notes. I use notes. Competition between the Protestants and Catholics here. But he went to a Protestant school. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was there for a couple of years. Then I went to seminary. They
Well,
kicked me out.
What I was going to say is when the Industrial Revolution hit, they had a sociologist named Durkheim who saw the rise of depression, anxiety, and he had this phrase called anomie. Okay, it's this breaking apart, and our society's adopted, and we begin to rebuild identities, whereas people left village life, and we built things like the YMCA, the YWCA. That's the type of social movements that need to come about. People need to build clubs that I just keep hoping that Elks Club survives in Bismarck, right? I mean, this is hanging on a thread, but people meet in person, and they're all about my age and older, but if the young people start to realize there's some reason to come to Rotary, some to come to these things before they vanish. So I think we just need to get the word out and start to reconnect these people. One college I recommended, they do Tech-Free Fridays. Have a big screen with a movie they all watch together, and then they would talk about it afterward. And some of those type of things on the campuses might go to rebuild community.
But there's a consensus, isn't there, that there's a problem, especially in the wake of some of the things that happened in education during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll tell you, I experienced, with just about every other person in higher education in this country, I experienced what Jeannie Twenge talked about in 2016, where there was a big shift in mental health among college students. And her observation was that it was the first class, the freshmen of 2016, who were digital natives, who didn't remember a time without an iPhone. So I saw that shift. But I've experienced too, and I don't know if others who are teaching have experienced this, but I teach a course for our freshmen this year. Here are students who were in 8th or 9th grade in high school at the time when everything went online. And there's a consensus that they're not finding freedom in their phones or in social media, and that they need to, they might not have the tools or the wisdom to know how to break free, but they want to. That's super encouraging.
You mentioned like the Elks Club, the civic society. There's a book Bowling Alone. There's a number of books that look at this. The erosion of civic society and the erosion of connectedness. I mean, whether that is church attendance or the fact that most Rotaries, Elks, and other things they're aging out, show up sometime, and that was pre-internet. And so the value proposition of those organizations, it was basically come in. It's a professional organization. There's a service expectation from a lot of those clubs, and what you were establishing is your say-do ratio as a human being in your community. You were developing your reputation at the same time you were engaging in actually addressing issues within your community, and that was a key conduit for information about what's happening in the community, and a key conduit to get the connection, to get consensus, because all these clubs were overlapped. And then, and if you go further back to smaller and smaller communities, a lot of times it was just the church, but you have these connecting things. We've been able to farm that out because of the information side, but it no longer needed it when everything went digital, and when things went broadcast, and then when things went internet and personalized. So when somebody young, a young accountant, looks at their own trade space of, do I join the Rotary Club? They don't see the upside, because it's a bunch of time, and what am I going to get out of it? And so we've now been running that experiment for many, many years of humans developing their reputation via LinkedIn. Which is, LinkedIn's great for what it scales. It's lousy for actually learning about a person. And the fact that we're not live streaming this, and the importance of actually human connection and exchange at an embodied way, and learning about the dimensions that are beyond just a text or an email. We're now raising whole generations that have had less and less of that human connection. At the same time, we're giving them endless more options.
Can I up the ante here? I have a theory which is hackneyed. It hasn't been tested or peer-reviewed or anything around all these questions, but I think actually the young person considering what the benefit of joining Rotary would be, that person has been deceived already in a very subtle way, because I think human beings have a transcendent capacity. We're the only animals who look to the stars. And so there is a capacity within us for wonder, and a hunger, a deep, insatiable hunger for connection and for community. And there's a transcendent element to that as well. There's a sense in which we never quite believe, even if we somehow philosophically become materialists, we never quite believe that there's not more than meets the eye. We never quite believe that hope and love and desire are just really material realities, the swirling of atoms and those kinds of things. And so because we have a transcendent capacity, that's satiated by human connection. So if you join Lions or Elks or Rotary, you're not just joining a local chapter where you can play cards or have a steak together. You're joining a multinational organization which makes you feel like you're a part of something greater. You know, you go to Sertoma Park in Bismarck, that's a fraternal organization. Service to humanity is what Sertoma stands for. And then prayer, too. The tapping into this contact with a vast, invisible world beyond that which I can encapsulate with my own mind, heart, and ambition and aspiration. That's what prayer is. It's a communication with this vast world. The internet counterfeits that. It gives the impression of having access to that when it's not quite the same thing. And so I've been on a transatlantic flight where I've been instructed that even though we were flying into the day, that we should all close our windows so that it wouldn't interrupt anyone who was doing work. And I got up and looked in both directions, and here's a huge airplane full of people all huddled over their phones as though in prayer. It's no different from a monastery, except that the outcome or the happiness quotient is a lot less. And so that's my theory. I think that what's happened is that we've settled for very useful. We've taken our technology and we've allowed it to replace things which technology can't replace, which are questions of human of human meaning, of transcendence, the numinous and the spiritual.
So let's talk about truth a little bit. When we think about, people on their phones, as though in prayer, and we think about AI, and how good our phones are getting at basically just making sure we're paying attention to it. And in many cases, there's money to be made behind that. We're heading to a point where it's already present on X in terms of people using AI-generated content. Now, it's mostly meme culture, and it is hilarious. I mean, it really is hilarious. You've seen this stuff where especially with the election season, where they'll put Trump and they'll put Harris, and the AI will now make. Look at The Office. They did a promo for the show The Office, but it's Trump and it's Biden and it's Harris in all the characters and with the music. But anyway, we're heading towards, can we trust the news? We already know that news is. There is no bias in news. At the end of the day, the process of editing means what don't you choose is just as much a manipulation as what you do choose to tell. Even if what you choose to tell is verifiable, it's what you chose not to tell. We can't get away from that. So if it's all bias, it's all propaganda. Now we throw in that you can tweak it or whole cloth it in a way that we can't tell. And then that's going to get spit out there, because even if this is proof, we can show this is fake, it's going to be shoved out there anyway because people are going to be benefiting from it, especially political. What do we counter that with? And is this, where we're heading? Is getting ground truth from humans in a physical environment and reestablishing that kind of ground truth network, and learning to ignore or put an asterisk by information that's coming out nationally because it might actually be completely fake. What is our relationship with truth seems in jeopardy.
I have the answer.
Then absolutely, please.
I'm only half joking. I was going on the stage in Philadelphia to give a keynote, and I have this framework which I gave in Valley City. The world is splitting into three worlds. Human natural, which we came from, machine robotic from Watt steam engine, and then cyberspace, I call it. And the day before the conference, Zuckerberg announced he's going to create a metaverse. And I sat down furiously writing everything that wouldn't work. And I'm convinced the metaverse will be an asterisk for cyberpunkers and people want to go do wild, crazy things. But what we're going to have is we're going to have the natural verse. And it'll be digital twinning. This is already happening in industry and the military. They can do maintenance on an aircraft engine in Dubai back at Wright-Patterson Air Base with digital twinning, that we have a representation of a real thing, and we're working on it. And I believe there's no way the values of New York, as much as I love New York, will be North Dakota. So metaverse will not work. If, let's say, New Yorkers demand that we allow, romantic interactions of adults and children in the metaverse, that will not hold in North Dakota. And I was laying this out to a U.S. Senator from another state, and he stood up and he goes, there's no way that's going to happen to my daughter. I said, sir, then you better make some laws. So what I believe is going to happen is there will be a massive digital representation of the real natural world. So you'll be able to do digital twinning, but it has to exist in a real place, and you'll solve all the policy ethic norms problems because North Dakota has laws for everything. Right? We have laws, and so the digital twin will obey those laws, so there will not be inappropriate activity.
Do you mean like interacting via augmented or virtual reality
right.
in an environment where all of these people also exist?
Yes,
and you
the
can reach
only
them?
people that can be in the North Dakota natural verse have to be real people. You cannot have bots impersonating.
And your behavior in that natural verse is subject to
the laws, because otherwise, think of these games. I've got a relative who plays games all the time, but once an AI bot is in there, he knows he'll lose every time. But if the games can only be populated by humans who are certified, right? You have to take your CAC card, right? What do they call it? They made it fly, the real ID or something like that. So I think it's going to break down. But I just want to leave one positive note that because I know we're about out of time. North Dakota is going to boom in the age of AI. Okay, we have the energy, we have the weather. The data companies want to come here. We have robotic test centers. We have Grand Sky, Grand Farms. I want to, for the people here, there are going to be so many opportunities. We're mainly talking about the ethics and the policy and the morality, how to navigate it. But from a business opportunity, North Dakota is going to be a state of probably 1 trillion machines with less than 1 million people. But there's going to be incredible opportunity and wealth creation. But I do believe on this whole dilemma of what's real and what's fake, it's eventually going to be the lesser included place, and it'll be twinning of the real world. And I'll be able to interact with my grandchildren like a FaceTime in a hologram, but it'll have to be certified real humans, and they're not getting a fake grandpa. So there's my answer. I'll stop there. More than you probably want.
No, it's very interesting if we recreate a true digital twin and we experience that through some augmented virtual reality, and if we get better and better at that. That's still not the real, and it's like I see utility in some of that, but it's like fundamentally, are we heading in a direction?
But it solves the problem of trust you started with.
But
they're certified to be in the place, like a passport.
I'm not sure I want to spend a lot of time in there other than maybe work type interactions, but truth and the erosion of truth and where we are right now.
Yeah, the question seems like a dark question, but it's very exciting to me. To have any, even a threatening or a promising ignition of the question of what's real and what's just apparent, what's really true, that's a question which is right at the heart of the human quest. And it is caught up in issues of trust. What do you trust? How do you trust? How do you verify? Those kinds of things. And that's where education really comes into its own, because we've been on a trajectory for a long time in which education, the whole quest of education, which is a grand human quest with lots of possibility, has been we've been on a trajectory where it's been diminished and diminished and diminished, where all of a sudden the greatest universities in the world are just high-tech trade schools. And trade schools are great, they're just not universities. It's a different type of thing. And so education is meant to foster in students a philosophical habit of mind whereby they're able to see things in relation. And so they learn the method that's proper to each different discipline, not for the sake simply of becoming specialists, but so that they can step back and see how everything relates to everything else, and sense that there's a mystery that runs under all things and that their life is a part of, and that gives meaning and purpose. And so there's this whole sense, but none of that's possible if you've cordoned off the possibility of truth. And so questions about what's true and what's not true are fundamental. They form the foundation upon which we can do real education. And that's why I'm not a doomsdayer around these questions. The application of AI in educational settings is tricky. As I was walking around here, I saw that there's a sign, how to use AI at Valley City State University. There's a whole sort of the first thing says, look at the student handbook, and then, which is how we do a policy at Mary too. And so, I was interested in that, but the challenge that it poses for us as educators is an exciting challenge, because we can become lazy as educators too, and we can demand so little of our students such that we're not really having them do human work. We're not really having them synthesize, we're just having them summarize. And so the human capacity for synthesis, for forming connections between things, that's what gets you not a technocratic, but a truly human society, which is wisely using technology for the promotion of the human good. This is an opportunity for us to seek truth together when we had abandoned it some time ago, I think, and in which we can really, really do education, which is harder than training.
So they say that, you know, Americans always do the right thing after they've tried everything else. And I wonder sometimes, like, I'm deeply invested in higher ed, part-time in this role I have, you know, my wife and I as a donor, as a parent. So I feel I have the justification to also complain about the erosion of the value proposition and what's happened in K through 12, which is dramatically eroded, and it used to be a bulwark that higher ed had the rigor. I would challenge that and say that there's active erosion happening in higher ed as well. The potential, the threat of AI and assessment-based learning, personalized tutors, figuring out the intrinsic motivation of every user and real-time iterating and adapting the information flow, replacing the missing cohort in online education with interactive AI avatars that can also be, you know, entertaining and other things. It's a real potential disruptive force to brick and mortar higher ed at a time when brick and mortar higher ed is facing lots of existential issues. Maybe, you know, that actual kind of real threat will cause us to figure out what it was originally in the Western canon. And there's a surge in classical schools.
Yes.
I mean, the amount of people who are saying there's got to be a different way in K through 12. So maybe this is actually a very good thing, because it puts higher ed, frankly, under a kind of threat of what is the academy. Is higher ed traditional higher ed? Does it
Well,
can keep the mantle of the academy?
Yeah, I want to thank our professors, and several of them here in the front row who have been doing a lot of work on this already and helping, sharing. That's the other thing, is they're all working together, just like this Dakota Digital Academy. Thank you for taking the job, because we can't all do everything, but we can get to scale. I think what you might see in higher education is a split in three ways. I think Zuckerberg and other people will build a metaverse university. He bought the patents for the Oculus glasses, and that would be great for people who have anxiety, perhaps, of being out, you know, like my son having to write a math problem, you know, on the board, and everyone can look at it, right? You know, he's done great eventually, but I know it caused him anxiety. People that are place-bound, maybe severe disabilities, that a metaverse with Oculus glasses will be in place, totally virtual, online virtual. Then there's going to be people that react to say, this is human-centric, like Virginia, no cell phones, and we are going to have human interaction, much like the Waldorf schools, until I think the 7th grade, there is no digital machines anywhere. It's all hands-on hardware. But I think where the university system will be is a hybrid of that, right? We'll navigate that because people want to connect. They want to be, you know, they want to maybe be a future partner, right? You know? But then also they want to be able to access classes, you know, maybe you, Mary, and the universities will have classes taught together. Carl and I were talking about that at lunch today, just so you know. But technology will enable that. So I think we're going to have those, and I think you're on something big with this tutor. Brockman, when he came to UND, he's a co-founder of OpenAI, he said, prepare yourself that people might have lifetime tutors. And this is where North Dakota has to really think hard, that we're a massive country. You know, the Supreme Court's already ruled on a very controversial issue that states will decide profound issues. And I think there's nothing more profound. It's a sacred trust with children. And how you treat children in some places is different than other places. And so I think that's where North Dakota, I want to thank the governor. He's got a working group right now. We've got higher ed. Dr. Pringle's one of the reps on a subcommittee on large language models for North Dakota. Do we need to build our own? Which will then have our values and norms, ethics, maybe with a legislative oversight committee that says, this is the position we take on these controversies like animal research. Think of animal research as considered genocide someday, and all of our data is in some cloud computer in a state that has an emergency clause of the legislature, and it's banned and locked up like that. But in North Dakota, maybe it's North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming. We already have the Mountains Plains University Innovation Alliance, unprecedented. 13 research universities, $1 billion in research, 200,000 students. Maybe we build out our own large language models to handle that issue of learning. And again, back to my point of the metaverse, one size won't fit all. Not everybody's going to be able to use the Microsoft cloud or the Google cloud. You may have to have customized cloud. So I know we're out of time. That's a big topic. Someone could work that on their doctoral dissertation or something like that.
So, thoughts on the revivification of the academy before we close?
Yeah, I would double down on what I said before. I think that these technologies, and AI in particular, provides us with a landscape in which we need to reevaluate how we're really doing education. Because, again, we can take a reductionist vision of the human person. We can take a reductionist vision of ethics. So what kind of ethics can you impose? Like, Pope Francis convened in Rome the Rome Call, which is this question about the ethics around artificial intelligence. And the first signatories of it were the Pontifical Academy of Life, Microsoft, IBM, and Cisco. And so what were they asking? They were asking questions about, well, the ethics of artificial intelligence and what it could mean at a certain point for analyzing who's reliable in terms of granting a mortgage, who would be the best fit for a job, what the recidivism risk of a particular inmate is, who is eligible to get political asylum or social assistance. You can't simply farm those questions entirely out to machines because we're talking about the destiny of human persons here. And so I think that these ethical questions they've always been at the center of education in the great tradition. And I think that they're more central to education now because ethics isn't just about rules, it's about human flourishing. And so if you make just a rules-based ethical setting, you're not really grappling with those deeper questions, and education is about grappling with the deeper questions, and this is why you see a resurgence of interest in classical education, even at the primary and secondary levels, you know, where now we have students coming to the University of Mary who have read Aeschylus and Aristotle and Plato and Cicero's speeches already, and that's pretty intimidating for all of us who have to dust that off and see if we can remember our Latin grammar, you know. And so I think it's magnificent. It's really wonderful, these questions. Again, human beings in every single age have been haunted by this question of the right use of technology. And is technology our master or our servant? And I think that that's the ultimate question which we have to keep at the center of the conversation.
It's a great question to leave everybody with. Let's thank our speakers.